Education will come to order. The clerk shall take the roll. Clerk shall close the roll. A quorum is present. Good morning, everyone. First, we'll take administrative action to refer House Bill 1815 by Delegate Campbell to the Committee on Public Safety. Do I have a motion on that? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, it is referred to the Committee on Public Safety. This morning, we are pleased to hear from Zach Robbins from Appropriations. He's an analyst who's going to be describing to us a little bit about where the joint subcommittee, many of you know, through the budget, we developed a joint subcommittee on elementary and secondary funding from the House and Senate. We've asked him to come and give us an update. Thank you for joining us, Zach.
All right, good morning, Chairman Rasul and members of the committee. As the chairman said, I'm Zach Robbins. I'm the K-12 analyst for the House Appropriations Committee staff. I'm here to update you on the work of the joint subcommittee and its work during the 2024 interim. Could I have the presentation up, please? The joint subcommittee was established in budget language, and it consists of 5 members each from the House Appropriations and Senate Finance and Appropriations committees. From the Senate, Senator Locke served as chair this past year, along with members from the Senate, Senator Lucas, Hashmi, Boysko, and Obenshain. And from the House, Chairman Rasul served as vice chair, along with Delegates Sewell, Bulova, Austin, and Moorfield. The charge of the joint subcommittee is established in budget language. It's to provide ongoing oversight on SLIQ funding policies and to make recommendations back to the money committees. In 2024, the joint subcommittee was charged with reviewing recommendations and policy options from the 2023 JLARC report on the state's funding formula, as well as to develop a long-range plan for phased implementation as appropriate. You may recall JLARC's report included a long list of potential actions. Major funding recommendations were divided into longer-term actions as well as shorter-term actions. And these recommendations are also grouped into several key themes, like what costs should the state recognize from school divisions, how should the state share the funding responsibility with localities, and also how the funding formula should recognize unique student populations as well as unique school division situations. There were also policy options in that report to shift to a student-based formula in lieu of our current staffing-based funding formula. There have been 2 budgets adopted by the General Assembly since the JLARC report, containing about $2.7 billion in additional funding directly to school divisions. Some of these actions are directly linked to JLARC recommendations, in particular, additional support for English learners and at-risk students. Technical updates for the 2025 session, they will add another $135 million in support across the biennium, plus any additional policy actions that would be taken this session as education remains a priority for the Appropriations Committee. So the Joint Subcommittee met 3 times during the interim. About 70 public comments were received via an online portal, as well as in person at meetings. We heard from JLARC as well as national experts to discuss funding reform experiences in other states. And the Joint Subcommittee determined that for this session it would focus on only near-term JLARC recommendations. It was also determined additional support should be provided for special education as the at-risk and ELL populations received funding increases during the prior session. And also the Joint Subcommittee began to look at how to approach the longer range issues after the 2025 session. So the Joint Subcommittee's final recommendations discussed at its meeting in December included the first recommendation, which is to eliminate or raise the support cap. This was the only near-term recommendation from the JLARC report that was scalable, easily implementable, and lifted all ships, so all school divisions would receive additional funding. The second recommendation was to create an add-on for special education in addition to the existing funding that's provided to support special education positions. This add-on would provide a specified percent increase on top of the basic aid provided for each special education student. With this concept, you would have 2 tiers of add-on rates. You would have a lower rate applied for your level 1 special ed students who require less intense supports, and you would have a higher add-on rate applied for level 2 students, which require more intense supports. And the cost for each 1% of the add-on in this structure is about $8.7 million for level 1, and 1% for level 2 students is $1.8 million. And this add-on is intended to be a temporary measure until special education funding can be more holistically addressed. And the final recommendations from the Joint Subcommittee addressing how to continue its work into 2025, there was consensus among members to transition into a work session format and include additional stakeholders, similar to how the Early Childhood Commission that some of you serve on is facilitated. And also the Joint Subcommittee discussed as we develop the work plan towards 2025, we need to continue looking at how other states approach this issue. So that concludes my update, Mr. Chairman, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Zach. Are there any questions from the committee? Delegate Simons.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Can you tell us a little more about the long-range reform plans that you all have? What do you think it's going to take to get this done? How do we address what they're doing in other states that you think might be good examples of a long-range plan?
There's some exemplar states that have transitioned recently. We're beginning to look at how they structured and facilitated that process. Most of them did involve a larger group of stakeholders from school divisions, from teacher organizations and superintendents organizations, and we're looking at how we can incorporate that into the process moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as we go through the process, I know there are a number of questions as people continue to have them around LCI, funding formula, the JLARC recommendations. We will, as we head into 2025 and beyond, in this process, we'll be welcoming stakeholder input. There are robust comment periods around each meeting, both before and after. And so we encourage all of the stakeholders who want to be involved in the process as we think about what's best for Virginia to make sure that they have their voice heard. Thank you very much, Zach, for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have a presentation from Ashley Kenneth from the Commonwealth Institute to give us a little bit of perspective on the impacts that some of our investments in a bipartisan way that we've made, given the JLARC recommendations.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chair Rasool, members of the committee. Again, my name is Ashley Kenneth. I'm the president and CEO at the Commonwealth Institute. And with me this morning are several of my team members, including our Director of Research and Education Policy, Levi Gorin. The Commonwealth Institute, there are slides. Thank you. The Commonwealth Institute believes that we can and should have high-quality public schools in every community where children can thrive, no matter who they are or where they come from. We want this because our children deserve it, because we know that funding makes a meaningful difference in student outcomes, and because high-quality public schools are the foundation of a strong multiracial democracy. You've heard from me before and from JLARC SLIQ report about how much work is needed to reach that vision. And I think it's important to celebrate the progress that we've made, thanks to the hard work of many people, including the members of this committee. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the recent investments by the General Assembly and how that's helping local school divisions across the Commonwealth better serve their students. To understand where we are now and the findings of the JLARC report, we have to look back at the cuts that were made during the 2008 to 2010 Great Recession. A generation of students went through schools with reduced support staff, sagging teacher salaries, and aging infrastructure. Then the pandemic hit. The General Assembly has responded to the calls by students, parents, and teachers for improvements in recent years and has made a lot of progress. That's shown in this graph, which measures inflation-adjusted per-pupil funding for Virginia's local school divisions. For the 22-23 school year, state support for Virginia students finally rose to above pre-Great Recession levels, boosted by beginning to unwind the arbitrary cap on state funding for support staff. And in the policies and budget you adopted last year, you've started to fund the near-term recommendations from JLARC to improve educational opportunity for students facing particularly high barriers to success. As you can see on this slide, the largest investments you made last year were providing the state's share of 3% salary increases each year, which we hope will exceed inflation, backfilling expiring federal pandemic funding for childcare, and providing additional support for students in low-income communities and English language learners. Going back to the last biennium, the biggest investments were a down payment on the state's school maintenance and construction backlog, addressing inflation and high vacancy rates by raising salaries, partially lifting the support cap, and providing flexible one-time funding. So what does this mean for students in our local schools? In my own county, Chesterfield, the state budget that was passed in May provided an extra $24 million in state funding for fiscal year 2025, beyond base funding, re-benchmarking, and technical adjustments. This helps pay for 4% salary increases, paid parental leave, bonuses for teachers in high-need schools, and annual substitutes. In Fauquier County, their primary goal for their fiscal year 2024 budget was workforce investments. With the help of $3.2 million of the additional $3.5 million in state funding they received in fiscal year 24 compared to the prior year, they were able to provide a 5% salary increase. In Lynchburg, the initial budget for the current school year presented at a March 26, 2024 Joint City Schools work group included pretty significant reductions in staffing levels. With extra state funding from the approved state budget in May, they were able to keep 18 of those positions and also provide 3% pay increases. In Bristol, increased state funding helped avert a potential staffing crisis in a school district facing the expiration of federal funds. The district transformed from a March budget, planning for position eliminations and minimal raises, to a June budget that expanded student services and provided meaningful staff compensation. Virginia has many communities that are great places to raise a family, with thriving schools full of advanced coursework and extra support for their students, mostly thanks to the local investments well above those required by the state funding formula. And at the same time, we need to acknowledge that there are some schools and communities that have been left behind, whether by neglect or design. We have work to do together, all of us, to build on the progress of the last few years and realize that vision of great public schools in every community. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Kenneth, for joining us today. Are there any questions for Ms. Kenneth? Thank you. We appreciate the Commonwealth Institute's work, and I especially appreciate how you create your little, I call it a cheat sheet, budget cheat sheet, so it helps us to all better understand how the budget is working in many different ways, very objectively. So thank you so much for your presentation today. With that, we will turn to, we have one bill on the docket from the Early Childhood Subcommittee, House Bill 1612 by Delegate Hernandez. Our understanding is that there is a new substitute for the committee. We'll ask Delegate Hernandez to quickly describe his new substitute, then we'll adopt and take action.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the chance to present this substitute. This is HB 1612, and the underlying goal is still the same: to explore new tools and incentives to help child care subsidy program bring more providers in who are open during non-traditional hours for your military families, nurses, first responders, et cetera. We've made two sort of clarifying changes in this bill after talking with folks at Department of Education. Number one, we've put in a delayed enactment until July 1st of 2026. The child care subsidy program technology behind the scenes is going through some major upgrades, and I understand that it will be done by this date, and which will make it much easier to implement the provisions of this bill. Second, we have asked the Early Childhood Care Commission to take a look at non-traditional care as part of its existing study that it's doing on child care generally, due out in October of 2025, help make recommendations about how to structure this and also how to minimize the need for additional general fund dollars, all in the spirit of reducing the FIS. So that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a motion on the substitute? Motion's been made and properly seconded to adopt the substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, the substitute carries. The correct motion would be to report and refer to appropriations of the bill that is before us.
So I would like to make a motion to report and refer to appropriations with substitute.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to report and refer with substitute House Bill 1612 to appropriations. The clerk shall open the roll. Clerk shall close the roll. Bill reports 16-5. Thank you, Delegate Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, turn to Delegate Simons.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, we stand adjourned. Next, immediately after this, is the Higher Education Subcommittee. Thank you.